Good morning. Shane asked me to give my testimony, and that's what I'm going to do. And I titled it, How Lockwood Helped Me Come to Christ. I so often meet people who have known God all their life, who grew up Christian and over the years just grew closer and closer to God and became more confident in their faith. I usually can't help but feel a sense of envy. I always wonder how that must have felt like, especially as a child or teenager, to never be alone and to always have someone you can trust and talk to. I wonder that because growing up, I did not know God. In fact, I've only somewhat known God for a little bit over a year now. That is, when I committed and became a Christian. In other words, for 35 years of my life, I was my own God. And at first, being your own God doesn't really seem too bad. You get to decide everything, you control everything, you are the one in charge. No one other than yourself has ultimate authority over you. At least that's what I thought. But in reality, the problem is that I'm not perfect. I'm not all-knowing and I'm not all-powerful. It's like having a toddler drive a car. Sure, he technically is in charge. He's sitting in the driver's seat. But what good does it do? He doesn't know he has to stop at a red light. He doesn't understand how a car works. His feet don't even reach the gas or brake pedal. But of course it is difficult to reflect, to observe yourself if you're in this position, because you simply don't know any better. You don't know that there's an alternative. And to be honest, when I was a teenager and young adult, I actually thought I had everything figured out, and things were just the way they were supposed to be. And here's why. Growing up in Germany doesn't only mean you can go to bakeries all the time and that you get to drive on the Autobahn. For many, it also means to not go to church, to not learn about God, and to not be around Christians. Germans are just not very religious, and the ones that are keep it more or less to themselves. It might sound counterintuitive because Germany has thousands of these beautiful old church buildings. Every town has at least one, and every 15 minutes you hear the church bells ring telling you what time it is. But the church in general is just more of a faceless institution. It is only meaningless, outdated traditions that are ingrained into the culture. And that's how it was for me too. My parents were and still are atheists. We never talked about God. I didn't really have any friends that were Christians, and if there were, it wasn't something that was discussed. In addition to not even learning about God, I had other reasons to rely solely on and to trust only myself. My parents, though I have no doubt they have always, in their own ways, loved me, couldn't give me the support, love, or confidence I needed growing up. My father was at work most of the time, and when he came home, he would often be drunk. My mother dealt with her own trauma of having lost her mother when she was just a child, and also of having a potentially deadly heart disease. Overall, they just weren't people I could rely on or go to for advice. In fact, I still remember one incident fairly clearly. One time I asked my mother if we could help someone out, and I don't remember what exactly it was that I wanted to help them with, but I remember my mother's answer. Why would we want to help them? We won't get anything in return, so no. I recall that I was very confused by her answer. On the one hand, it's very logical and objective. Plus, it came from my mother, someone to whom I still looked up to at this point. On the other hand, however, it just felt really, really wrong. So what I learned from this was to just not ask my mother again for any kind of advice and to only listen to my own moral compass. Growing up like this made me tough, or at least so I thought. I don't mean that I was a bad kid. I never really got into any kind of trouble. When I say tough, I mean that I thought I was mentally strong, that I had my emotions under control, and that I was able to not only see the world for what it is, but to also deal with it accordingly. I thought there was a rational, logical, and scientific answer to everything, and emotions just get in the way. And I was looking for answers, answers to the big questions. But the answers my rational mind gave me were pretty depressing. Why is life so unfair? Well, that's just how I perceive it. It's not objectively unfair, so I guess I will have to deal with it. What is the purpose of life? There's no purpose. You have to come up with your own purpose if you feel like you need a purpose. What happens if I die? Nothing. I'll be gone and that's it. Needless to say, I wasn't the happiest person in the world. When I went to college, I pursued a degree in philosophy because surely, I thought, these philosophers are smart people and they will have the answers. But I quickly found out that there was no one answer. Pretty much every philosopher I learned about had a different explanation for how the world works and why we're here. When I graduated, I had more questions and was more confused than when I started. I just felt that there had to be more to life, that there had to be a satisfying answer to all my questions. So I just kept living my life for a while without real purpose, and that is when I met Michael. He studied abroad at my university in Germany. I noticed that he was somehow different from my other friends and that there was something about him that I liked, obviously. But at the time, I didn't quite know what it was. He told me that he used to be Amish, which I thought was pretty cool, and also knew that he was a Christian, which I graciously tolerated. I didn't mind religious people, but I thought, unlike me, they were simply too weak to deal with the harsh reality of things. I was convinced that believing in God was just an escape from reality. Although I have to admit, I envied them at the same time because at least they were able to believe in something, and they most of the time seemed genuinely happy. Anyway, I think, unbeknownst to me, this is probably when my journey started. Michael was, and as most of you know, still is, just a really nice guy. Always friendly, smart, outgoing, optimistic, and as I like to call it, annoyingly hopeful. And hope was something that was completely foreign to me. I'm more of a worst-case scenario kind of person. So although it wasn't an active decision I made, I kind of wanted a piece of this happy and hopefulness. Well, fast forward, we started dating, and when his year in Germany came to an end, I decided to go to Michigan with him. Some of the first people I met here were members of Michael's family and some of his Amish friends. And all of them were extremely friendly, welcoming, and intelligent, which didn't quite fit into my worldview since I thought Christians were somewhat simple. Why else would they believe in a God? But again, that wasn't quite enough to turn me into a believer. The first few years we lived in Lansing and didn't attend a church, which was fine with me. But after I completed my master's degree at Michigan State, we decided that we wanted to move closer to Michael's family and friends. After having moved down here to Burr Oak, Michael suggested one day that we should start going to church. He wanted to go back to LockwoodChurch, the church he used to attend together with his brother Tim after he had left the Amish. I wasn't super thrilled, but agreed to go because I knew it was important to Michael. And to my surprise, I actually enjoyed going to church. For one, the people here at Lockwood were so super welcoming and friendly. They, or better you, quickly became the family I always wished I had. So that alone was reason enough for me to go to Lockwood every Sunday. Yet there was more. I quickly realized that Shane was really smart and had profound knowledge of the Bible, Christianity, God, and life in general. And week after week, I received the answers I had always been looking for. It was like being back in college, taking philosophy classes. But this time, everything made sense. But again, this didn't automatically turn me into a Christian, but it was enough to make me question my way of thinking. Remember, I always thought Christians had to be weak and simple in order to believe in a God. But at this point, I had met and married Michael. I had become part of his God-fearing family. People at church had become my family too. And of course, there was Shane. These were all people that I respected very much and that weren't at all simple or weak. And in addition, they lived good lives. Lives full of love and hope and without fear. It was then, after I had realized all this, that I decided that I was at least willing to look into this whole Christianity thing. And at the very least, I wanted to be like the people around me. I had enough of bitterness, anxiety, fear, anger, and hopelessness. I wanted to be happy too, just like the people around me. So we intentionally got more involved at church. We went to go deep. We started to volunteer regularly, to meet with other Christians outside of church, to read authors like C.S. Lewis and Timothy Keller, and I just tried to have an open mind in general. And to my surprise, my life and attitude really did change. I became more outgoing, more positive, and every now and then I even caught myself being a little bit hopeful. Still nothing compared to Michael's hopefulness, of course, but You have to start somewhere. I still was not a believer at this point, but seeing this positive change in my life and realizing that it was caused by intentionally exposing myself to and being open to Christianity made me consider that there might really be some truth to it. And for the first time I thought, maybe there really is a God. And I actively decided that I wanted to believe in God and believe that everything that I had learned about Jesus was really true. Finally, I was no longer immune to what C.S. Lewis called the good infection of Christ. I had caught it. I was infected. But of course, you can't just decide that you want to believe, snap your fingers, and suddenly you are a full-fledged believer. That would be too easy. So all I could do was to just continue with church and Bible studies and everything else, and in addition, to act like there was a God, and to act like Jesus really died for my sins and then came back to life. And I did this for a while, and it even went somewhat well, but I was still lacking a relationship with God. And I was praying to God, asking him, God, if you really exist, why do you make it so difficult for me to believe in you? Why can't you just show yourself? Just give me some kind of sign so I know for sure. And of course, nothing happened. No angel choirs singing, no sunbeams covering me in light, no burning bushes. And what I often think about is Matthew 17:20, when Jesus tells his disciples that all they need is faith as small as a mustard seed. A mustard seed is tiny, and the bar doesn't seem to be set too high if that is all that you need to move mountains. But precisely because a mustard seed is so small, I had such a hard time realizing that I might have had it already in me. But then a series of events happened. It all started around Christmas time with me winning a drawing at Bronson Discount Foods. I won a $100 gift card, and you can ask Michael. I was ecstatic. Not so much because of the money, but just because I had won. You wouldn't believe how happy I was. And then I immediately felt a little nudge. I couldn't get rid of the thought that it would be the right thing to do to donate the gift card to our church's benevolent fund. I already got the happiness out of it. Someone else should benefit from the money. That was a big step for me. Money has always been something I needed to feel secure, and my old self would have never given that money away. But I felt pretty good because I knew it was the right thing to do. In fact, it was the Christian thing to do. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, believe it or not, I won another drawing, which I entered into with the words, "It would be a Christmas miracle if I won this." This time, it was 7 times as much money as I won the first time. I couldn't believe it. At the same time, I felt like it was somewhat of a reward for giving away my first gift card, a confirmation that I did the right thing, and moreover, that someone was watching me. And remember, I had asked God for a sign, but I caught myself thinking, sure, this is pretty cool, but how can this have been God? This is not how he gives signs, by letting someone win drawings. That's not biblical or holy enough. I was still waiting for an angel to appear or something. But just a day or so later, I thought, this is silly. I asked God for a sign, and now all these great things are happening to me. Not just the drawings, of course, but my entire life and attitude had improved so drastically by now, and I still refuse to accept God. Why would I ask him for a sign if I'm not ready to accept a sign? What else can God do if I'm being so stubborn and willfully blind? It's time for me to commit. I mean, what are the chances? I never win anything, and then I win 2 major drawings in less than a month's time, which I myself called a miracle. So that day, I didn't only start to believe that God was real, but I also realized that he knew and that he cared for me, that he knew me and that he cared for me. How else would he have been able to use 2 drawings to convince me to choose and accept him? And looking back now, it's just so very evident that God has always been there in my life. I was just never able to see him, simply because I hadn't been ready. But he waited patiently for me and used my upbringing, my childhood, all my hardships, people and events around me to eventually open my eyes and my heart. I realize now that everything that happened for a reason. God used every single moment, person, and event in one way or another to prepare me, to bring me here, to this moment, to this church, and to him. Unfortunately, all this doesn't mean that I don't have any doubts or questions anymore, My relationship with God is very new and it still needs to grow stronger. Even though my past led me to God, it is also my past that makes it difficult to trust and to fully rely on Him. Thinking of God as a loving, benevolent, and wise father is difficult too, if the only kind of father figure you've ever had wasn't like that at all. But if I've learned one thing in this whole process, it is that God is patient. He will wait for you. And equally important, He knows your heart, He knows your struggles. All you need to do is to earnestly seek Him, and He will be there. It worked for me, and I can now join Moses, Samuel, Jacob, and others in saying, God, here I am. Thank you.